Great. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this special webinar hosted by the International Press Institute together with our IPI Turkey National Committee. It's a big pleasure to be here today for the launch of this new report on the new mainstream media is rising and it seeks support. It's our report on digital media in Turkey. And we're really excited today to have the two authors of this report here to talk about their findings. Just as a brief introduction, I'm Scott Griffin. I'm the Deputy Director of IPI, which is a global press freedom organization based in Vienna. And I'm happy to give the introduction to this event today. And then we're going to hear from both of the authors. This report, just to give a brief idea of what it's about. We all know that in Turkey, the mainstream media, what was once the mainstream media, has been taken over by directly or indirectly by the government, which has had huge consequences for the ability of journalists in the country to do their job, to report on matters of public interest, and to be able to provide information to the public and to citizens. And this report is looking from that perspective at the situation of digital media, which have become a place where free expression and news and information is relatively better able to survive and reach the public. But we see that digital media in Turkey, we're not quite at that level yet, and we can say that these digital media have been able to successfully replace the former mainstream media and take over that important role. And so this report is looking at what is the current situation of independent digital media in Turkey. How successful have they been, in doing their jobs? And most importantly, what do they need? And what challenges do they face? And this report takes a look at a number of different challenges, including the abilities of digital media to connect with audiences through tech platforms like Google, Facebook, and Twitter. What are the big challenges there? But also resource issues. What are independent digital media in Turkey missing in terms of human resources, in terms of know-how that can allow them to take that next step? And I think for me, one of the key quotes that comes out of this report is that, and this is really reflected in the title, is that these new digital and independent media in Turkey have the kernel or the seed inside of them to become the new mainstream, and to play that role of public interest media. But they still need our help, and they still need certain resources and tools to reach that level. And this report lays out, I think, very clearly how that can be done, what steps can be taken, and based on both a quantitative and a qualitative analysis, thanks to the excellent work done by the two authors who I want to introduce briefly now. We have the lead author, who is Emre Kızılkaya, who is the vice chair of IPI's Turkey National Committee, a former editor at Hürriyet, and also now the editor of journal.tr. And we have the assistant journalist and assistant researcher on the project, Burak Ütücü. And before turning over to them, I want to give briefly the platform to Reyhan Akyavaş, who is IPI's Turkey program manager, to just give a brief overview of where this report falls into IPI's broader work in Turkey. Reyhan.
Thank you very much, Scott, and thank you all for being here and listening to us. And I also want to thank Emre and Burak, especially for this really valuable report. And I can see at right now, Yusuf Kanlı is also thanking you guys for such great report, actually. Basically, IPI is active in Turkey from the beginning and establishment of it in 1950. So one of the founders of International Press Institute was from Turkey, Vatan newspapers, a founder and owner. And since then, actually, Turkey has been one of the top focus or countries or priorities for us to spread IPI's vision for quality journalism and press freedom, protecting press freedom. And especially the last 3 years, we have our campaign Free Turkey Journalist established in 2018, and for 3 years we had quite a big focus on the release of all journalists who were in jail. But we also did a lot of other activities protecting and promoting quality journalism with the support of our national committee in Turkey. And right now we have secured another 3-year funding for the IPI's Turkey project, and we are happy. We are really happy to be more visible and active in Turkey. And in this new 3-year, our main focus and goal stays same for the journalists in jail and press freedom, protecting press freedom for everyone. But also we would like to now give a bit more weight of our focus to now promoting quality journalism, supporting local journalism, and also the as part of this report as well, online and independent journalism will be a great focus for us. And this is why actually this report falls perfectly fit in the IPI Turkey National Committee's vision for the upcoming years under this project. So I would like to thank once again and give the floor to Scott back for the presentation.
Thanks so much, Renan. So we'll get started now. Just a few sort of housekeeping notes that's already placed in the chat as well. We are recording the event as we start the presentation, Emre will be giving us a presentation of the work. Please feel free to put questions that you have in the chat. We may sort of throw in some questions to Emre while he's giving the presentation, if it makes sense. Otherwise, after the presentation, we'll have a Q&A session at the end where you can also speak via audio to raise your question. I may also jump in with some questions while Emre is describing the report. Otherwise, let's get started. So Emre, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and walk us through this report, explaining the methodology that you use to approach the findings, and finally sort of the big recommendations and conclusions that you found. So really looking forward to it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Scott, Renan. Let me first briefly explain the background behind the report. As a journalist, I've been working since 2002. I worked from the start to the end at Hürriyet for 15 years, more than 15 years. I managed its digital edition, I managed its English edition, I managed its foreign news service for some time. And before that, I was a foreign news editor. And when, for instance, I was around the age of Burak, whom we together prepared this report, I was lucky because Hürriyet at that time, as a, let's say, mainstream news organization, and the largest one in Turkey and one of the largest ones in Europe in terms of reach, including digital reach. So it was impactful, it was powerful. Plus, because of its identity as a mainstream newspaper, it was attracting very diverse audiences. Politically diverse, culturally diverse. For instance, I remember even as late as 2011, I think, there was a Marshall Fund research in Turkey about Turkish media. You can Google it and find, and you will see that the only Turkish newspapers that attracted the readers who voted for all the political parties in the parliament were Hürriyet and Posta. Posta was like the tabloid edition of Hürriyet. So everybody was reading it. Means it was breaking echo chambers. That's what the mainstream media should do. But at the same time, I was lucky that because of that diversity, our newsroom was more or less also diverse. Turks, Kurds, conservatives, socialists, nationalists, every kind of people were working with us. That's why I was in an environment that nourished me. Unfortunately, today's young people, young journalists, when they come graduated out of the school, they cannot find any such place anymore, because the mainstream media has collapsed in the past more than 10 years, actually, because of the government's ongoing campaign against free speech, and coupled with the technological and business transformation in the world for the media, it meant that this collapse. But now, slowly, things are getting better. And I think the report, more or less, is trying to depict a picture where things are not so bad, but at the same time, there are a lot of stuff that we must do to sustain quality journalism in Turkey. Because in Turkey, to be honest, journalism, the average journalism has never been so good, so high level. But at the same time, there was always some people, some individuals, some journalists who were really, even by sacrificing their lives, they did good journalism, investigative journalism, like people like Abdi İpekçi, people like Uğur Mumcu, who all work for mainstream media organizations. Now the question is, will the next mainstream media be there as something in the past, even perhaps in a better way, by removing its disadvantages that it had, and there were a lot of disadvantages as well. But when the year closed last year, the picture was still so bleak. There were dozens of journalists in jail. Still, there are more than 60 journalists are still in jail. More journalists are assaulted. Just in January, for instance, half a dozen journalists were physically assaulted in Turkey. There are stricter regulations legally. For instance, the social media law. The crackdown on free speech is digitized. Now the regulators are not, the state is not only blocking access to the content, but it is also removing digital content by deleting history. And digital assets are seized. For instance, Hürriyet was sold, and that's what led me to my resignation. And now I work with Journal. And after that takeover of those older companies, the new owners, pro-government owners, had a big advantage because, for instance, Hürriyet had a very long history of newsmaking, and that's why on platforms like Google, it is seen as an authority. So because of that, whenever they they publish a new report, they have an advantage on places like Google. There are others too, I won't go into detail. There are heftier fines, penalties, as you may know about RTÜK for the foreign audience. RTÜK is the radio and television authority in Turkey that imposes really like millions of liras worth fines for just basic newsmaking or commentary, political commentary. There is an even higher employment in the media sector, one of the highest among all the sectors. Because of that, self-censorship is even wider. And because of that, the news content average quality is still very low. So how does independent journalism still survive in a digital refuge facing all these challenges? We are trying to finding these answers, and we need to have some data, some good, updated, detailed data which we lacked. That's why we studied these 28 national and local outlets in Turkey. And our sample is like editorially and geographically diverse, we can say. Geographically diverse because we picked local outlets from each of the provinces, each of the regions of Turkey. And editorially, I say, because both from the pro-government outlets in the Group B, which is red now, red in this picture, I will explain that network later, and the Group A, the blue one, independent outlets. And if you check the independent outlets or the pro-government outlets, you see they're actually in really different places editorially. Some of them are really conservative, almost Islamist or Islamic inspired or something like that. Some of them are like socialist kind of. Some of them are really neutral, politically neutral, some of them. So it's diverse, we can say. We will see these two groups in different platforms and metrics that makes sense to measure the digital reach of media outlets. We use industry standards in these measurements. It's not an academic study, so it's not, for instance, the sample is not a random sample, but we think that it makes the most sense in terms of understanding our research questions, let's say, the answers to the research questions. And when we are talking about platforms, news media's primary channels in Turkey are these platforms. If you check any of the big news websites, you see that, for instance, the average here is 68% of their traffic, of their visitors come from Google, Facebook, Twitter, and in some ways YouTube and Instagram as well. These YouTube and Instagram do not really bring a lot of visitors. These are mostly platforms that are designed for the audience to consume the content there instead of going somewhere else. But Google, Facebook, and Twitter are particularly important because a vast majority of the visitors are coming from these. That's why, to answer these questions, we looked into the digital performance in 2020 for all those media outlets in especially three dimensions. One is total digital reach. It means that it includes their websites as well. In order to measure it, we cooperated with Genius, which is IAB's partner in Turkey. This is between advertisers and publishers. This is the umbrella organization. So they have the most comprehensive data set and a really good way to distinguish the real users, let's say. They have a representative panel of more than 16,000 users. So these are like real human with their consumption behavior, news consumption online. They are making a footprint, and from that we have this data. On the other hand, they have an algorithm that links this data to the tracking, on-site tracking. And on-site tracking means that a lot of these websites have the codes of this particular company because advertisers need to know where the audience is. That's why they have this tracking codes, so we know who is coming and how many seconds they spend, for instance. And by combining these two data sets, like users, real users, and that algorithmic tracking, we have the total digital reach. So we know how big portion of the audience a particular news outlet can reach in Turkey digitally. But we need to see the social media engagement as well, because this is not, as I said, digital reach is mostly about visits to the websites and mobile applications. But social media engagement is what your news story can make as an impact as well. Because people can just retweet your tweets and without even visiting your website, it is still an impact. So we need to measure that. In order to measure that, we gathered another data set based on millions of interactions on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube around the news content shared by these particular outlets last year. And the third dimension is search. And search is important because as now we are coming into the territory of algorithms. Both social media, many of the social media companies, and search engines work with algorithms because the number of news content is too high that they need to pick some of them to highlight and recommend to the reader. And search is really important for Turks because, for instance, I will give you just two examples. One is news, haberler keyword. There are more than 1 million people searching that every day. So another keyword, breaking news, son dakika in Turkish, again, around the same number of people searching that. So what Google picks for those particular queries are really important. Moreover, there is the trending queries. From time to time, some search explodes, like earthquake, let's say. Whenever an earthquake happens, in the next few hours, millions of Turks search sometimes. And if Google channels that traffic to a particular outlet by featuring them as the top result, I remember from Hürriyet that once we had more than more than 400,000 people instantly on the website just because it appeared on the first as the first result on Google for earthquake query, because an earthquake had just happened before that. So in order to get that, we made a custom code, a Python code that continuously checked which news outlets appeared in the top results on Google for trending queries and for these big regular search queries like breaking news. And we also separately looked into Google News application. This is a separate algorithm. This is not the main search engine algorithm. And Google News page is for more loyal news readers, let's say, perhaps a little bit like the breaking news search, because more loyal news readers tend to go to that web page and check the news, etc. We also separately scraped the results from that Google News homepage and collected it as well. Now, all of these stuff, especially algorithmically, bring us to some new, or let's say not very new, but some conceptions like platform oligopoly, algorithmic homophily, perhaps we can talk about it later, echo chambers, and what's called incidental news exposure. Because, for instance, when an earthquake happens and you write earthquake, actually you don't want to go to a certain newspaper or something. You don't want to even go to a news story like that. Perhaps, for instance, you can go to the state observatory for earthquakes or something like that. Perhaps you are looking for them. But Google is presenting you certain news outlets, so you are incidentally exposed to those news. That's why these algorithmic choices, and these algorithmic choices are not magic or or something that robots do by themselves. These are designed by people. So Google's preferences are there, embedded in those algorithms. So it was important to explain this. I go into detail a little bit. That's why I will go quicker now. Behind those numbers, in order to understand, because those numbers are giving us the answers for what's and how much, stuff like that. But why and how, in order to understand it with Burak, we conducted surveys and interviews with media executives and journalists. So these findings in a nutshell, let's go. Digital reach of Group A outlets. Group A, we grouped the independent media outlets, but as I said, these are like really diverse, not actually same kind of people. For instance, Sözcü, as you know, is like perhaps much closer to let's say Cumhuriyet or Yeni Çağ than to Evrensel, because left wing, right wing, centrist, etc. Or there is Karar, which is more conservative, for instance. So when we look into that, Sözcü penetrates the total Turkish audiences 38%. And Yeni Çağ, interestingly, I was not expecting them to score so high, but it's 17%, and Cumhuriyet is the third with 13%. And when we look into the pro-government media companies in the Group B outlets, I say pro-government just to abbreviate it actually, because these are also very diverse, because none of them, for instance, I mean, Sabah is like the official mouthpiece of the government because of the links of its chair, of its board members to Erdogan's family. Hürriyet is like almost seized. It's a takeover, but it's like kind of a forced takeover, encouraged by the government. And Habertürk and NTV, two televisions, they're not like Sabah. They're not like propaganda machines like Sabah or Yeni Şafak. They try to be as close as the mainstream as possible to capture their audiences on TV, because these are television stations. They still get the advertising money. So if they lose a lot of advertising money like that by alienating the audience, they will lose. That's why with such commercial motives, they are not like Sabah. And we see that Hürriyet still enjoys an audience penetration of more than 50% like Sabah. And Habertürk is right behind them. So when we look at the total audience penetration, the monthly audience penetration, we see that the independent outlets in total reach more than half of the audience, and the pro-government outlets reach more than 80% of the total audience. But there is a caveat here: social media engagements. When we look at the social media engagements, we see something strange, because when we see this, like this is like digital reach, so it's mostly about like website visitors, let's say. But this is social media, all social media like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter combined, all interactions for almost a year. And as we see, actually the COVID pandemic boosted the engagements like up to 10% on, up to 100% on social media. And here I excluded Sözcü in this graph because its reach, its social media engagement is so big that all the others are dwarfed. That's why this is excluding Sözcü. Cumhuriyet, T24 and Tele1 is leading in digital engagement. I will explain why it's strange compared to the website digital reach. But this is Sözcü alone, and as you see, it's around at some point more than 10 million interactions a week, and here we were seeing less than 1 million even at the peak. That's why it's like more than 10 times bigger than the largest of the other independent outlets. But interestingly, most of their engagement comes from opinion articles, particularly Yılmaz Özdil articles, because that dipping of the graph shows when Yılmaz Özdil, the popular columnist, takes an annual leave. So instead of news stories, opinion articles are popular on social media by Sözcü. And this Group B outlets, like pro-government outlets, let's say, Yeni Şafak is the leader, has got the highest engagement, but it relies heavily on Instagram video views. If you exclude Instagram video views, Yeni Şafak is around the same level with NTV and Hürriyet. Still, when you compare all of them, independent media has more than 16% more interactions on social media. At least last year, it was like that. And when we look into the local journalism in Turkey, it's almost non-existent in terms of social media engagement compared to the scale of national media. There are only 3 outlets among the ones that we recorded. There were just 3 outlets with some sort of significant social media interaction. All of the others had fewer than 100 weekly interactions on Twitter. Their sources are somewhere else. I will explain later. So when we look into the comparatively the Facebook performance, we see that independent media has higher growth on social media compared to the pro-government media. If you check the, for instance, total interactions, or let's say total interactions perhaps may be a little bit misleading because there are more outlets in Group A and fewer outlets in Group B. But still, if you look at the rate ratio, you see that the average weekly interaction rate is 5 times more. And the growth is much bigger for independent media. Many of the pro-government media outlets are losing followers, lost followers last year. For instance, Hürriyet lost more than 80,000 followers just on Facebook last year. But for instance, Medyascope grew its Facebook page more than 100%. I need to check, but more than 100%. So number of viral news content, particular content, if you look into that, what we see a almost total domination by independent outlets, and they are really diverse. For instance, Sözcü had got 36 viral content. By the way, this viral content, it's explained in detail in the report, but it attracted more than 10,000 interactions, each of these content. And there are more than 60 separate content like that last year produced by these outlets. So these were the shares of their content on all platforms, social media platforms. Sözcü led it by far again. Sabah is the second, but and Teyit is in a completely different organization, although it's an independent organization. It's a fact-checking organization, and it is actually mostly aims to dispel this information where it happens, which is social media. So it's particularly good for such organizations to go viral on Facebook, because this is where they actually dispel that disinformation, and they had viral stories as well. And only one individual is there. It's Maya Saymaz, and it is a Sözcü columnist now. In the past, he's a good reporter he was a good reporter for Hürriyet, and before that Radikal. He's here because he shared 2 Sözcü articles, and those shares also went viral separately. And there are 2 local media organizations, but unfortunately their viral content is not really news. It is news kind of, but sports news with non-journalistic language, let's say. One of them is a company from a media company, a newspaper from Trabzon, and Trabzonspor, the football club of the town, won. And these guys posted a story that is, jubilant about this victory. That's why it went viral. So we can exclude that as a real impact journalistically.
Emre, sorry, if I can just jump in there, because there's a couple of questions in the chat that maybe can be addressed now. So one is about Teyit, which you just mentioned, and why you decided to include it as part of this research. And the second question is from a journalist at Evrenso asking how Genius reaches the data that you are working with.
Sorry, I couldn't understand the second question.
So the second question is, the person wants to know how Genius reaches the data.
Genius reaches the data. Okay, I understood. Let's start with that. Genius reaches the data by, as I said, first tracking codes, software. So when I was working for Hürriyet, for instance, we had their codes on our website. So we were sharing our data with them. They could track that. And most of these outlets still have their codes on their websites. But in order to measure all the digital media landscape, content ecosystem, they have that algorithm whose details are explained in the report, which is called Genius Audience Real User Algorithm. It is doing 2 things. One, by using a representative panel of digital users, more than 16,000 people, they are seeing their habits and feeding that algorithm by that consumption data. So even if they don't track with codes, they can have really well-informed guesses about all the other news websites. And the second thing that they do, they make it the real user metric, which means that the numbers that you see there are actually real users, just one user. Because, for instance, as a former Hürriyet editor, when I was turning on the Google Analytics dashboard, I was seeing users, like unique users. But in reality, these were not unique users. It's saying unique users, but these are unique devices. Because if I go through my, for instance, phone and laptop, and then again, PC, for instance, it is counting all of them separately. So I'm like 3 people to Google Analytics. But here with the real users algorithm, Genius has got that academic scientific approach to singularize that user. So they can predict who is who and making those devices just one person. The second question is, Teyit, as a fact-checking organization and as a member of the International Fact-Checking Union Association, like many others, we wanted to make that sample as diverse as possible. So not only ideologically or let's say politically or editorially, but also like geographically and also in the way that they produce their content. For instance, you also see Medyascope there. Medyascope is mostly based on video and especially social video. There are like television channels there, like Tele1, Halk TV. So these are like traditional television channels going into YouTube, for instance. There are like legacy publishers of newspapers, like Cumhuriyet, Sözcü, very old newspapers, Cumhuriyet particularly, very old. There are also different other different groups as well. That's why in order to make it as rich as possible in all platforms, we picked Tate as well, and there is no question that they are an independent part of the independent media. Is there any question? Should I, Scott?
No, I think I don't see any other questions. But again, people who are, to all the audience members, if you have a question while Emre is talking, feel free to throw it in. No, I think it's been really interesting so far. So I think one big question now is, so what's the big catch when you what you found, particularly looking at Google? What was the big problem that you saw in terms of the way that the algorithms treat independent media, digital independent media in particular?
Well, the collapse of the mainstream media meant that the mainstream media have also become echo chambers, instead of the way that, you know, that Marshall Fund study that had found out that Hürriyet could attract readers from who voted for all of the political parties in the parliament. It was something like a strength for a newspaper and something good for democracy as a whole. So because of this, we suddenly see that everybody is going into their own echo chambers. But right now here in this Twitter analysis, we analyzed all those outlets' interactions, like all the interactions around those outlets' content, let's say. So when you look into that, you see that, for instance, Hürriyet is now closer to Sabah. I mean, though their audience is closer to Sabah because they are interacting with Sabah content more, for instance. But on the other hand, you see like Cumhuriyet, Oda TV, for instance, I was not expecting Oda TV to have a central role like that. Or Sözcü and Habertürk somehow is now closer. So we see that actually the centrality, which is actually a concept about all those network graphs as well. This is the centrality-based network is changing. So actually, a lot of media organizations is coming to the center, and others are moving away from the center, because Hürriyet had a more central role, for instance, in the past. In terms of that, we could see that even by just looking into TweetDeck, and we see that every kind of people are retweeting our content. It's not like that anymore for Hürriyet, but others are replacing it. But because there are so many of them, it looks so fragmented that we think, oh, everything is like before, but actually it is not. And in this picture, actually, for instance, Karar, Evrensel, Medyascope, and Teyit, although they are not closer to the center, because, for instance, it seems that Duvar, Diken, T24, and Medyascope's readers are interacting more with Teyit content on Twitter, at least. So they are connecting these various really politically different, like, for instance, Yeni Çağ is like a nationalist newspaper, Karar is like conservative, and Bir Gün is like social democrats, Evrensel is like more labor rights focused. So there are bridges, a lot of bridges, other connectors, but at the same time, a lot of them are coming to the center of the audience, at least for Twitter. This is when you look into YouTube, because YouTube is Twitter is more like for news lovers, right? Just like around 10% of Turks use Twitter, but YouTube is much more popular. It's the almost as popular as Google, as popular as a Google search. That's why incidental news exposure on YouTube is really important as well. So YouTube's algorithmic handling of recommendations, because the next video is really important. Whatever it gives you, it usually attracts you. And when we compare all those outlets, we see that independent media outlets, Oda TV and pro-government Yeni Şafak, have the highest YouTube engagement. Interestingly, I was not expecting that at all. Habertürk and Halk TV, these are television stations, so they have an advantage kind of, because they have a constant stream of video that they can just repackage for YouTube, and they have the highest high quality reach. I explained how we use that metric, how we created that high quality reach metric in the report. I won't go into detail. Combined presence on YouTube table shows that actually the pro-government or the independent media, they are producing, they have more subscribers, YouTube subscribers, and they have a higher video production compared to the pro-government outlets. And interestingly, perhaps one of the most important findings in this report is that YouTube recommendation algorithm appears to handle these Turkish news outlets differently, their videos differently. It is, as you see on the top two graphs, these are showing the most popular, three most popular videos of Oda TV on the left and Medyascope on the right. And when you start with 1, 2, 3, these are video 1, video 2, video 3, where Google leads you. So for instance, Oda TV's first #1 video, YouTube recommends Habertürk from there and CNN Türk from there. And after that level, you go to Habertürk and CNN Türk again. So you are going into the territory of more pro-government videos, news videos. And the second video is A Haber and Oda TV. And the third video is going to entertainment content. So it's just purple dots. And on the right, it's similar, kind of similar for Medyascope, another independent outlet. It is going to Habertürk, a lot of Habertürk, and occasionally to other independent outlets. But pro-government Yeni Şafak's viewers are kept by YouTube's recommendation algorithm in an echo chamber. It's almost completely Yeni Şafak. When a Yeni Şafak viewer sometimes accidentally opened a Yeni Şafak video, at least for their top 3 videos of the year, they were recommended by YouTube only Yeni Şafak videos, almost only Yeni Şafak videos on one hand, or some other conservative smaller channels. Like, for instance, there is a popular street interview channel by an Islamist, like a very almost radical Islamist, I can say. He's making these street interviews and it is recommending that. So a similar kind of worldview, I can say. But Google's search engine, compared to the video platform that it owns, YouTube, is even worse, we found out. In those high volume news-related and Turkish keywords and trending queries of the day, like earthquake, more than 90% of Google's top story slots, which are the top slot, are going to the 3 pro-government media outlets, Hürriyet, Sabah, and Milliyet. Hürriyet may not be as pro-government as Sabah, but still under their huge influence since the takeover by Demirören, and Milliyet is another Demirören company. And only on the 3rd place there is Sözcü, but as you see, the scale is so different. I mean, heavily pro-government algorithmic handling, let's say. It's important and striking because Google is not doing that in the United States. Google is giving the United States readers, users in the United States, a more pluralistic algorithmic curation of news stories. We gave examples and numbers about that by looking into the United States as well. And Google News, as I say, it's the separate application, not the Google search engine itself, but Google News application. It is slightly less biased, but still biased because it highlighted the pro-government media outlets more than 73% of the times against the independent media's 26%. On the left, you see how those B-A groups are meshed with each other in terms of how many times they appeared on those top slots. And the D group here is the others group, including YouTube itself and some. By the way, there are also, even in the D group, there are some pro-government, really hardly pro-government companies like ensohaber.com. It's also a news website, really hardly pro-government, staunchly pro-government. But we don't include it because we looked into other media outlets that we listed. So is it because perhaps Google is doing that because Turkish readers prefer pro-government outlets? No, it's not, because if you look into the Google's own data on Google Trends, you see that news brand searches are actually, for instance, Sözcü, if Google's algorithmic handling was really just, or let's say proportional to the public interest, then Sözcü should have been featured 3 times more than Hürriyet. But actually, when we look here, we see Sözcü is dwarfed by Hürriyet's prominence on Google's search engine for news-related keywords. Or similarly, Cumhuriyet is actually on the same level with Sabah. Around this, similar number of people are searching for Sabah and Cumhuriyet. Google Trends show that, but here we see that Cumhuriyet is given nothing by Google search algorithm, and Sabah is just after Hürriyet is the leader.
So, Emre, we seem to be one of the key findings of the report, right? That despite what basically we can say is a strong foundation, a digital foundation for these independent media, in fact, it seems like the algorithms of online platforms like Google and YouTube seem to be treating pro-government media and independent media differently in a way that disadvantages independent media. So I have maybe just sort of 2 related questions about that, which probably you're going to answer anyway. The first is, what is the implication of that for independent media? And do we have an idea of why this is happening? I mean, you posed one question about why it could be happening and said that's not the reason. So is there any idea of why this is happening? Mm-hmm. So those are my questions. And then we have a couple of questions in the chat about this. So one person is asking, and maybe you've touched on this already in the meantime, is there any data or estimation on the share of real users coming from Google search in pro-government media? And also there's another question about that one of the biggest problems in Turkish digital media is clickbait, and whether you looked at that as well. So throwing a couple of questions at you, but I think we're really at one of the big findings of the report.
About the ratio and the particular outlets and how many visitors they get from Google, we will come to that in the survey section. And about the clickbait, we will also come later. But the other 2 questions I can answer now. First, what is the implications for what are the implications for particular outlets? If they are not on Google, what happens? First of all, ad revenue. As we will see, most of those outlets, all of those outlets are primarily funded by ads, digital ads. And if they, and as I say, more than 30% in average, more than 30% of their traffic comes from Google. So Google's picking of pro-government outlets means that it is an indirect way of funding pro-government outlets by Google. Because of Google's algorithmic preferences, pro-government outlets are being funded because these digital ads, as I say, just earthquake, 2 million, 3 million people read just one news story and brings you hundreds of thousands of lira sometimes. Of course, this money is dwindling nowadays. I mean, in the past 10 years, Google is taking a bigger and bigger share, and publishers are getting fewer and fewer. And you know, from the global debate about Google and Facebook in Australia, in France, Spain, we know its implications there. But we can stop here. We will later turn about why is Google doing that. Well, Google and Facebook, especially in Turkey, tended so far to be very government friendly, especially since when Erdogan visited Google's Silicon Valley headquarters in 2014. And then Google and Facebook particularly, even before a court order, they removed content, or they favored the government in some way, or the government, or the people closer to the government and the companies closer to the government, unlike Twitter, for instance. They never, angered the government that much. And YouTube, just once it was blocked in Turkey, as you remember. And after that, Google tended to, go well with the government, or becoming closer to the government even more. We don't see, for instance, they appointed a representative now. Twitter didn't appoint a representative. Google and Facebook said they will obey the new Turkish social media law, and they appointed a representative to Turkey. So that may be one reason, but we can't be sure. It's like their intentions. We don't know their intentions. Perhaps they are just unaware of the severity of the problem that actually tarnishes their reputation as well. Because the current Turkish ecosystem, when you search on Google something and always Sabah and Hürriyet's really garbage content is appearing on as top result, it is really bad for the user as well. And it is really, there are a lot of people on Turkish forums, for this online Turkish forums, a lot of people are accusing Google, criticizing Google because of that. It's not good for them. Perhaps they may fix that sometime after being aware of that. But there are also implications for individuals as well. And this is about amplifying disinformation and propaganda by favoring those pro-government companies but on Google's search engine. For instance, this is a recent search. Osman Kavala is a Turkish businessman and human rights supporter, and he's still in jail for a long time, despite the Constitutional Court and European Court of Human Rights rulings. And Sabah is, outlets like Sabah, sometimes Yeni Şafak, sometimes others, are always producing such conspiracy theories and disinformation around him, which creates, a public atmosphere, because people don't know the details. They don't read the indictments. Most people, on average. When you go to Google and search for Osman Kavala, the first thing is Sabah's conspiracy theory, total lie. Or Soros, let's give an example, an international example as well. As you see, Sabah's and Hürriyet's conspiracy theory stuff about Soros, about Rockefeller and Bill Gates, how they create the coronavirus, etc. Such stuff appear as the top result when you search it in Turkey. Google cannot do that in the United States. They cannot do that in the European Union. They can do that in Turkey only. And as long as the public is silent about that, they will keep doing it because the money is still pouring, and it seems that's what they really care. When we look into the national media executives' perspective about that.
Sorry, just before we go on to this section, there were just two more questions about this, so maybe just cover those now. One participant asks whether you're arguing that Google is intentionally supporting pro-government media. I think that you more or less covered that question already. That it's a little bit open about what's going on.
I don't rule it out. Yeah, I don't rule it out because we've been writing about this for more than a year and nothing changed at all. So it seems that, they are aware, they should be aware so far. But I hope they still didn't fix the things because it's a big company and their algorithm is not updated so quickly, let's say, although they update it quite frequently in the world, in the Turkish language, let's say, news environment. Perhaps it is even slower. So we'll see. But I don't rule it out, yes.
And the second question was sort of going more back to the beginning about how you made this division between Group A and Group B. The person is asking sort of how you defined independent. How are you making that separation between those two groups that we define as pro-government and independent?
Actually, our initial plan was to first make a survey with the readers to mark them in terms of where they stand. But then we took, this is not a scientific, as I said, not a scientific study with a sampling, random sampling, etc. So it is, let's say, common sense. If you just ask the reader whether Sabah is, let's say, whether Sabah is critical of the government in its coverage overall, or Sözcü, they will say Sözcü, it's common sense. Perhaps there may be just a few controversial controversial pickings that we picked. For instance, some people may say Habertürk and NTV is not pro-government, but I had already explained that. Overall, if you check their, for instance, speakers on their television shows, most of them are really pro-government people, representatives of the government itself. But still, as I mentioned, they are not as pro-government, they are not as partisan, let's say, and as biased as Sabah, and this is that mentality behind that, because they needed to be, because they are the television, they need to make the audience stay as large as possible. That's why they have some critical journalists as well, and that's what I actually mentioned it in the report as well. Some of the really good journalists are still working for Habertürk. There is nothing wrong with that.
Thanks a lot, Emre.
Hi. So yeah, that survey part is left only. Now we asked to the national media and local media executives. Some of them are managing editors, some of them are editor-in-chiefs, and other. One of them was the leader of the advertising division. So they say that overall they consider their journalists as their strongest human resources asset, and if they have the means, they can hire more journalists, more reporters, editors, etc. And as a weakness, they say tech functions and departments like product development, product design, software. This is the weakest link, according to their own perception. And they are focused in increasing their advertising and reader revenues, these two especially, but not the other sources. And other sources includes grants, for instance. It's kind of more controversial for them. Some of them say that they don't want grants, but most see themselves as unsustainable media businesses, unfortunately, they say. And most think Google and Facebook undermine quality journalism in Turkey by encouraging clickbait and by being pro-corporation, let's say, big players, not necessarily pro-government ones, but if you have tens of millions of clicks, Google comes to you and say that, okay, I will do that for you, let's make a deal, etc. But if you are producing really good content, but you are small, then you cannot even reach a Google representative, they say. And not only Google, but Facebook as well. And local media is a little bit different, not too much, but a little bit. For instance, they have more loyal readers than national outlets. How loyal readers is defined, you can find in the report, but they say in local media is around 33% of their total audience is really loyal. In national media has got 26%. And they have platform-centric editorial roles, more like social media editors, SEO experts. It's interesting. I mean, although they are smaller companies, they hire more of those platform-centric editorial roles, around 2 times more. Local media is also more relying to Facebook traffic than national media, and they are less critical about the search engines. And local media's sustainability perception, when we ask them if they are currently sustainable, they think so. They say, no, it's even worse than national media. And interestingly, they don't have a plan to strategically change their business, their journalism, their products, etc. And when we speak with particular journalists, for instance, independent media, Mediascope's founder and editor-in-chief, Ruşen Çakır, who was also awarded by the IPI some years ago, he says that the biggest problem lies in the fact that Turkey's independent publishers cannot even contact the big tech companies because they don't care about such small, let's say, outlets. They could be accepted to the Google News platform only recently. Even such a basic thing was hard for them. Or on the other side, for instance, Mines Bayülgen's Kapsül's editor. Kapsül is a newsletter. In another medium, let's say, what they say, Turkey's internet media is doing what's described as fast food newsmaking. So they are copy-pasting each other's content. This is like for independent media as well, including independent media as well. A lot of them are, their editorial policies are heavily burdened by ideological baggage. And young journalists like Mines and initiatives like Kapsül wants to produce their own original features, going beyond producing newsletters, like curating news. They want to produce original journalistic features and investigations because there's a vacuum, because the quality, the environment is so low quality. And how we can overcome this problem, it's Atakan from Tate's founder, summarizes very well. He says that instead of, we need established innovative organizations, and they need to understand the new world, the new content ecosystem, the new world itself, actually, the technologies, etc., journalists as well. And donors should support that ecosystem instead of just particular actors, instead of short-term funding to someone who cries most about the press freedom. The donors should see behind and see the big picture and support the initiatives that will boost the ecosystem and improve the ecosystem. And in order to do that, we had, I summarized it as 4 recommendations. What should we do as press freedom advocates and journalists? Connecting and uniting journalism. First of all, these independent outlets, although they have a lot of shortcomings and errors and mistakes, they are at some place now, at some scale now that is comparable to the scale of the old mainstream media now under the huge influence of the government. We cannot see it because they are fragmented. So in order to alleviate the problems of this ongoing fragmentation and polarization, we need to be allies as independent news media. We need to establish that alliance. We need to share the resources. We need to speak with one voice when speaking with the government and or the digital platforms that usually do not care about us. So, and the second step can be supporting the news ecosystem. And in order to do that affordable access to digital resources and services for modern journalism is really important. Many of the people, the media executives that we spoke, for instance, stressed that it is too expensive for them to hire a full-time software engineer. But I mean, New York Times or Washington Post or The Guardian aside, for instance, Hürriyet employs more than 30 software engineers in-house right now. And the average number is less than 1 for independent media outlets. So how can they produce really good, engaging, compelling, and immersive journalistic content and products? And watchdogging the platforms is important because they are favoring the statu quo, the digital platforms. They must be monitored to defend the public against their commercial opportunism. And EU will become, should remain as an inspiration as a better democracy. That's why its new principles and policies to regulate digital will be watched in the candidate countries, in Turkey too, for instance. And these hybrid democracies, let's say, it's particularly important for what is done in the EU. Because, for instance, social media law, the Turkish government said that we actually copied it from Germany. So even the national, the countries, the particular countries in the European Union, it's important what they do. Here, before I conclude here, but Burak can say something more about the interviews that he conducted with especially local media outlets, because this is particularly important. I didn't go into detail the local media a lot, but in Turkey, just last week we published a story about Turkey's news deserts on journo.com.tr, and we showed how Turkey is certain areas, certain regions in Turkey become news deserts. That's why supporting those organizations, those local organizations, are really important in Turkey as well. And Burak can say something. Burak.
Thank you, Emre. Hello, everyone, again. And Emre, thank you for the good presentation. Firstly, I will mention about the local media outlets and their problems also. They having some problems about the how can I say, there is no challenge. They always say there is no challenge in local media outlets. They always complain about their press advertising council actions and council charges, and Turkey's local media outlets, including the ones that are recently Facebook's journalism workshops, have been hit by all these negative impacts. And the government controlled the present press advertising councils. Decisions to impose fines on independent outlets, as well as various types of local pressures, cornered these outlets. And secondly, as an example of the complaints, although a local organization, for example, made the news first, but as Emre mentioned, Google algorithm puts the news of the big media companies that publish this news more than 2 hours later. The local media outlets publish the news before the big media outlets, but unfortunately, because of the Google algorithm, the big media outlets, when they take the same news, they are having the traffic. And also I will add something about the local media challenge. For example, Diyarbakır Tigris newspaper, Ali Yılmaz, Tigris newspaper editor, he said, we don't have any opponent here. We cannot have the challenge environment here, because if there is some opponent media outlets to us, maybe we could improve ourselves as well. Actually, this is the big and main problem in the local media outlets. The second problem is from the Manavgat Haber. Adem Polat said, he was saying some people, they want to try, they want to offer them some money as a grant, let's say, but also they want to make their propaganda as well, and they reject these offers because they say we want to just make the journalism actions, and we are not a press institution. Sorry for my English. I'm kind of excited. They don't want to accept these grants because of the not being a propaganda tool. And also this is I think this is basic and big risk in journalism at all, and they are not profitable. And in our interviews, as we talked, they always say we were not the profitable last year, and we are not expecting to be profitable in 2 years as well. They maybe expect 5 or 6 years, next 5 or 6 years, and basically the problems, all this. And also I would like to add one more thing. The Adem Polat also, he was saying that the press advertising councils and actions, he was saying that they think if they invest in journalism like 60 years ago, the newspaper will continue to press in black and white. because of the Press Advertising Council actions, they are not able to improve themselves because the council they are not helping them, and comparatively, oppositely, they are the council is charging them. They are is not supporting them, and mostly they're charging them. The biggest, most problems are these.
If may I would like to ask a question to Emre and Burak both. Basically, this report is an extensive study, and I think the local media part is particularly important. And I also know that Press Advertising Council, or Basın İlan Kurumu, right, yes, in Turkish, it is a very important factor for these local outlets to survive, because it's maybe the only income they have, and they survive on this. But did you also ask what can be the actually how can I say, like, what can be done for them to actually find alternative ways? How can they actually separate themselves or become more independent, not too independent to the press advertising agency income there, or the money coming from there? Do they have any ideas or any alternative ways?
Yeah, I can say something on this. Managers and editors generally they are working 4 or 5 people, and they say we need the readers' funds. And also we need to educate the readers as well. Actually, they are not responsible to educate the readers, but unfortunately, they think that we need to educate the readers to pay the news, because they say news is not a cheap thing. The news is expensive, and there are many fees, background of the news. Behind the news, they are expecting the council support, reader support mostly, and some business persons and some big companies to invest them for the independent journalism. That can make a difference.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question as well? And maybe just as a reminder, we'll wrap up fairly soon, but if you have questions, please put them in the chat, or if you would like, you can also raise your hand. I think my general question is, this is a really incredible report, which I think shows that, the independent media has what it takes to become the new mainstream media, but you describe these different structural challenges, the problem with the algorithms. We have a problem with having the right human resources, right technical resources, this lack of cooperation. How, if you have to take a step back and kind of assess the whole situation, are you optimistic about this, about the ability of independent media to become this new mainstream? Emre and Burak, what's your feeling after having done all these interviews and this research? And if so, why, basically?
Yes, Emre.
Yeah, please, Burak, please.
When we step back, one step back, actually, we are trying to be optimistic, actually, but the journalism is not working to be the optimist, as an optimist, because we have to see some real needs, actually, especially local and national outlets. It actually doesn't matter in the one point, because the basic problem is making our job as a journalist. These institutions, these media organizations, they don't want to manage them with the advertising funds.
We might have some internet problem. there. Maybe Emre, you step in.
Like to step in.
Yeah, I can. Perhaps not everyone could see that part. That's why your connection is bad. We can't hear you. Perhaps I can answer that question, answer box question. Answered 2 other questions on the chat box. İstersen Burak'ın alalım mı?
Yeah, I'm trying.
Not optimistic.
Duymuyor bizi.
Tamam.
There was a question on the question and answer section. What is the quantitative KPI of having viral news in this section? We needed to make a mark or draw a line, and we drew that line from 10,000 interactions. So those that attracted at least 10,000 interactions per content on social platforms, we defined them as viral news. And there were just 61 such content for that period. And I also answered in the chat box Erdal-based and Servet-based questions. So Burak, are you back? Can you hear?
I think he might. Okay, he's back.
I am here. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can. We can.
Yeah, I'm sorry for my internet. I was saying that the national or local media outlets, it doesn't matter. They are not optimistic, and we are not optimistic because they just want to manage themselves with the readers' money, and they need a digital literacy from the readers, and they trying to subscription system in their newspaper or in their organizations. Local media, for example, they are having traffic. For example, the 98% of from the Facebook, but they don't have any money from Facebook. They don't earn any money from Facebook. They just want to make some traffics, and maybe they can have some supports, and they can make some special news and future news by this money. For example, 5 local media outlets, they funded by the Google. And when I asked them, what did you, this money, I mean, what happened to this money? They say, we just paid our debts. We just paid the workers' insurance fees, salaries. They say we cannot spend this money to improve ourselves. We are just spending our some fees. That's why local media outlets needs more and more. Especially we can see that the biggest helper, let's say, the consul, but consul 1 week they are giving money to local media outlets, and the next week they are charging them. And what's gonna happen with what can happen after this process? I mean, you are giving and you are taking back, and it doesn't make any differences.
Perhaps it should also be mentioned that Facebook, for instance, when they have like Facebook News internationally, they don't do that in Turkey. So like paying to the publishers or featuring them in a special different tab for news, etc. Turkey is never in the list. They do it in especially English-speaking countries, and then sometimes countries like Germany, etc. But they don't almost never do it here.
Also,
but by the way, Burak, before it's late, now I see that Atakan and Gülin is also here. Perhaps as someone from Tate's founder and editor, they can see the whole landscape well because they are fact checking for the whole news ecosystem. So they see the content of all publishers, and especially those, as they are the partner of TikTok and Facebook in Turkey for fact-checking, they see those that go viral on those specific platforms and which ones are producing this information, etc. If you would like to speak, Atakan.
I'll see if one of my colleagues can turn on his.
Let me see.
Are you available, Atakan? Can you hear us? You are muted, I think. Perhaps you are away, or Gülin, if you would like, you can also. By the way,
maybe in the meantime, while we get to see if they are there, Emre or Burak, what about the impacts of the social media law that was passed last year? What do you see as the impacts of this law, which was widely criticized by IPI and many other press freedom groups? How is this going to affect the ability of independent digital media online to reach audiences?
Maybe we can read Emre, like the question.
Sorry.
Are you hearing us?
Sorry, I had just reach Atakan, whether he's there or not. Sorry, Scott, can you repeat? I thought you
were. Sure,
of
course. No, I was just going to ask because, obviously like press freedom is a big element here as well, which you also mentioned in your report. And I was asking specifically about this new social media law, which was passed in Turkey last year, which was widely criticized by IPI and many other groups for expanding digital censorship. I wonder if you can just briefly give your thoughts on how this law actually will affect the ability of independent digital media to grow and reach their audiences.
The recent legal regulations in Turkey, they have two implications. One is that since October, because it came into practice in October, the big social media companies, those that have more than 1 million users in Turkey, will need to appoint a representative, as you know. If they don't, then the final sanctions will be throttling them, basically, which means like effectively blocking them. And so far, I think Twitter is the only one. I think Pinterest and Twitter, they didn't appoint. The others appointed already. There is no problem for them. But Twitter will be in 1 month, actually. Next month, the throttling will start. So we will not be able to reach Twitter easily, let's say. Perhaps with VPN, etc., people can still go there, but it will be hard. Another thing is that another regulation makes that content removal. So instead of you just block content, the authorities removes digital content and deletes them permanently if you didn't copy elsewhere. And these are all like intermingled with the platforms and state and publishers. Why? Because, for instance, Oda TV's managing editor, Barış Terkoğlu, who just left Oda TV actually, just last week or 10 days ago, he told me that Oda TV's domain, so internet address, let's say, was blocked for the 4th time in a short space of time by the courts. Although the content itself is just free speech, it's critical journalistic content, and it is blocked. And because of that, they need to move the whole domain to another domain. So they are changing the name of the website, basically. It was Oda TV 1 first, and then Oda TV2.com, then Oda TV3.com. Now it's Oda TV4.com. And this has implications for instance, Google. Why? Because every time you change your website like that, you leave your advantages on search engine, because now you are a new website. Google spiders will have to crawl you again, and you need to have, by the way, a big news story archive to have some advantage on Google, to appear on top, etc. So platforms like Google, for instance, should take that into account when such a news organization in Turkey is blocked in such an undemocratic way, Google should not penalize that as if it's just another website. Servet Bey has another question about Google. He asks, is there any remarkable difference in the share of audience coming from Google search between pro-government and independent media? In this group, independent media, for a lot of them, Google, I mean, the average is around like 30–40%. For most of the biggest pro-governments outlets, it's more. For instance, I know that places like Hürriyet, Milliyet get even sometimes more than 50% of their visitors from Google. It's of course depends from day to day.
Emre, Gülin Çavuş is here. I think if she would like to talk.
Gülin, fact checker, do you want to tell something about the Turkish news ecosystem and how we can solve the problems?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Emre, to direct these questions to us. And I had an internet connection problem. I hope you can hear me well. I hope. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay, great. So when we're talking about this new media ecosystem, actually, all the time we are trying to say we should differentiate our business models, and we should find different ways rather than just binding to advertisements only. So actually, it's really important to talking about the membership or subscriptions models also, as you said. So it's really important to actually understand the new ways of connecting with people. And maybe many of you knows, but according to the Reuters news report, the 57% of the people in Turkey actually avoid the news. And also Servet is here, and he is very well know this fact. So we should do something to talking with our news with the different ways and different formats. And actually we should understand this digital literacy and what this ecosystem actually needs. So business models is one of the things. And the second thing is understanding these algorithms, these ways of communicating with people. Actually, the another thing is we not mention at all the community. We need a community to interact, and we have to talk with our community and understand what they really want to consume. And they really, for example, want to pay our news or not. For example, we did a project about anti-vaccine book. And we crowdsourcing for this specific projects, and people support this. So the idea of people never pay news idea, not actually totally correct. We have to find a new ways to do this. So I think we should understand what the social media and how the social media works. And I think your report is actually perfect, have a perfect questions in this report, because asking YouTube to why you just should, how can I say, should promote pro-government content to the anti-government people or understanding. So it's a really important questions I think news organizations and media outlets should ask to the platforms first. And I know that, Emre, you all the time trying to reach Google or another platforms to get an answers about these questions. And actually it's really important. And we should just first understand how these platforms works, and then binding connections and understanding the what community, what people really needs and what they really want to consume. And actually maybe trying to leave some, how can I say, this traditional and not very well working clickbait understanding of news and advertisement systems, and how can we change this? So I can maybe briefly explain, but if you have any further question, I can explain or talk.
Thank you, Gülüm. I think you can please explain, especially, for instance, when you, for instance, we didn't include TikTok here. What are your initial experiences with fact-checking TikTok content? It's very new, but
yeah. Actually, it's very new news for us also, but maybe I can just share some insights with everyone here. The first thing is the health disinformation is really crucial in TikTok. We can talking about this. So if any media organizations want to focus these platforms and these places, I think they should care about how also disinformation and misinformation affect this news ecosystem in such a platforms. So the second thing is, again, understanding the algorithms of platforms is really important, because TikTok is a really unique algorithm system when we compare other platforms. So I think is searching and analyzing the platform also is a little bit hard when we compare others. So the second thing is, and the political discourse is actually kind of confusing, because it's a little bit humor inside, a little bit rumor inside, and a little bit disinformation inside. So it's a little bit hard to detect disinformation in this platform about especially politics. So the first initials and first insights from the TikTok is, maybe I can mention about this, but I also can suggest that searching with the keywords and searching specific topics in TikTok is really crucial, because it's also can be used as a source of a news. So yeah, and maybe we can, we are planning to conduct trainings about how journalists search and use TikTok as a news source. So yeah, if you or any other panelists, attendees have a question, I can try to explain.
Thank you, Gülüm. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There was some questions I answered in the box. By the way, Orhan Şener is also here from TGS Academy. There is also a part of this whole picture that we didn't discuss, and that's especially the journalism students who come out of the school, and Burak was one of them. Just last year he graduated, and that's why he did the local media part great, as he was from Eskişehir originally, near Ankara town, and knows the local communities as well. And Orhan can perhaps, if you would like, Orhan, explain your experience with the TGS Academy in improving the capacity building of journalists, especially in terms of technology and business prowess, plus the next generation journalists. Orhan? And Erdal Bey, by the way, has a question, I think, if you, before Orhan comes.
I think we are also approaching to the end. If Orhan is not here, maybe we can also, Orhan is here, sorry, just a second.
There he is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. I just didn't know how to.
Erdal Bey's question, and then we can conclude. Orhan, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Emre and Burak and all the IPI staff, Scott and Renan. That was really a brilliant presentation and a report. Thanks for the effort. Just a quick words about our work at the TGS Academy. Because we believe in that there is now a generation gap, especially in the journalistic field. Normally, you would not learn most of the journalistic practices at the university, but you just obtain the foundational fundamental knowledge in that 4 years, but you know, you learn how to do journalism in the field by learning from your superiors, from the people who are older than you. But now this is not a chance, that is not an opportunity for most of the youngsters in Turkey because of the situation, as you have explained. Most of the media is now controlled by the government or pro-government business people. So we are trying now to overcome this gap of knowledge sharing and know-how at our academy by inviting experienced journalists to share their experiences with the youngsters, but also we are trying to update the journalists who are already working in the field about the current developments, especially technology-related aspects of journalism. This is not, I mean, there is much to do, but I believe we had a good start in the first 2.5 years. And it's not only us, but there are also other academies like NewsLab or BNet or the Journalists Association academies and many others. And I believe that once we are back to being a more, I mean, a democratic state, Turkey, we are trying to prepare this new generation of journalists. Because if you don't do anything, Emre consistently reminds this to everyone, if you don't do anything now, doesn't matter what happens to Turkey, even if we become the most democratic country in the world, we will not have journalists who are capable to do proper journalism anymore. So this is the time that we need to work on this, and we are trying to do this. Thank you for the opportunity to explain this.
Thanks a lot. And so I think we have one last question from Erdal Güven.
Erdal, yes. Let me see. Oh, Erdal Bey should be able to talk now. Yes. Hello?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I tried to ask the question through the chat room, but I think I should say a few words on the answer. Now, I have a, this is not only peculiar to this report, but I have a problem when it comes to defining independent journalism in Turkey. So I see it again in this report, in the categorization. So that's why I asked what makes media outlets like Karar, Yeni Çağ, or from the other side of the spectrum, so to speak, Cumhuriyet and Halk TV, or even Sözcü. What makes them independent? Because as far as I understand, as far as I know, being independent requires being critical.
I think
maybe Emre, you'd like to briefly answer that.
we have a
your sound is going now. Just you can switch to Wi-Fi or something. But I can answer one shortly. Of course, when you use the conceptual words like independent or quality, for instance, quality, what is quality journalism? How we will measure it? About independence, how will we measure it? I try to actually answer it in the box as well, but now I see that I sent it accidentally to all panelists, but not the attendees. That's why you couldn't see. I try to understand that we took the word independent here as a common denominator only by, if this is independent, it is not linked to power bases, either political power bases like the government, the ruling party, or commercial power bases like big corporations, the biggest media corporations. So there are two things, political and commercial, and they are not part of the power holders, let's say. Otherwise, of course, karar, as I say, conservative, close to certain political factions. Yeni Çağ is in completely another way, close to another faction. Or Teyit is completely different kind of company, a social impact company, having no relations at all with any of these political or commercial entities. But we need to still, just like for viral stories, what is viral? So we need to make a line like that, and our line was that common denominator of linked to the ruling party or linked to the ruling economic elite, let's say. They are not, none of them.
Thanks for that, Emre. And yeah, I just want to say thanks to everybody who participated today and joined in this. And yeah, obviously a big thanks to Emre and to Burak for putting together this really excellent report. And I think also to pick up on something that was said, you know, it's so important, I think, especially with this issue of the algorithms, we haven't received the response from the platforms that we need about this problem. And I think that the more that we talk about it, the more that it becomes a public issue, the more that we can build pressure on it is really critical. And that's what this report is doing. So yeah, it's obviously a really difficult problem to solve, but this is a way of continuing to make noise about it, because it, as you said, Emre, you know, you've raised this issue several times. It hasn't changed, it hasn't improved. But I think with this report, we're really putting it once again into the public sphere and public debate. So it's really excellent. So thanks to you both for your amazing work on this. And again, thanks to all the participants for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.